Hey guys, it's Mandee. You know I love Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler, and one of the things I love the most is they're always doing new things. And I recently tried their new sports massage, and I've got to tell you, it's incredible. So you know I'm active and I'm always focused on wellness, and this is just one more thing that I am adding in to my routine because now I'm hooked. They use the Theragun, which of course is going to help increase blood flow to certain areas and muscles that might be sore or tired or need attention, but you also get to add on another upgrade. You know, whenever I was there, I chose to go ahead and do the cup gliding as well as the hot stones. They work really well with the Theragun, maybe like a triple threat. Definitely ask for it the next time you go in to Hand and Stone. Ask about the sports massage. You can book your appointment today online at handandstonetyler.com, or you can stop by and see them. They're located in South Tyler in the Cumberland Shopping Center.
Welcome to the Celebrating Women podcast, hosted by Mandee Montana, a podcast that celebrates women, their stories, their struggles, and ability to overcome. Conversations that celebrate their gifts, their talents, and courage. It's the Celebrating Women podcast, presented by Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler, Texas. With over 20 massage therapists and 6 estheticians, certified and trained in multiple protocols, you can get an affordable massage or facial located right here in the East Texas area. Book your appointment today. Stop by the spa in the Cumberland Shopping Center in Tyler or online at handandstonetyler.com. Welcome back to the Celebrating Women podcast. I'm Mandee Montana, and I'm here with my special co-host, Kellie Evanstein.
Hey there.
You know what that means, right? We're talking about books. And we're talking about Sarah J. Maas books right now because we're in this long series. We started with ACOTAR, Feyre, the strong women in that. Last time we talked specifically about the Throne of Glass series, and we dialed in on the first half of the series, the first 4 books, and the character Celaena Sardothien, the main female character in the series. And we learned at the end, surprise, she has another identity. She is also Aelin Ashriver Galathynius. And so on this episode, we're going to be talking about the latter half of the series, the final 4 books. That would be Queen of Shadows, Empire of Storms, Tower of Dawn, and Kingdom of Ash. And this is primarily the latter half of the series where we see our main female character step into the role, the identity of Aelin Galathynius. But first, she has to put the mask back on and pretend and embody the persona of Celaena for a little while longer. Right, Kellie?
Yes. So in Queen of Shadows, we see her coming back to Rifthold, and she has to. So in the first 4 books, she is Celaena Sardothien. That's who she is because she has repressed her identity as Aelin for so long that she has basically become Celaena. And then at the end of Heir of Fire, she sort of makes that transition we talked about to where she becomes Aelin again. Mm-hmm. She taps back into who she really is, which is Aelin. And so when she goes back to Rifthold, she has to revisit the character of Celaena. So she actually, it's a very strange dynamic because in the first 4 books she was Celaena. Like that's who she was, and now that she's embraced her identity as Aelin, Celaena is sort of a character that she plays, and so that's a very interesting switch in this. So she's having to go back to playing that arrogant, cocky assassin that Rifthold is familiar with. So that's kind of where we start in Queen of Shadows.
This book is really a transition piece in a lot of ways. It is with her identity. It also is with magic, because in the first 3 books in Adarlan, we're seeing a land without magic, although we see glimpses of it and these, ancient word marks that are allowing it to sort of bubble to the surface. When she's in Woodland and Heir of Fire, she has access to her magic. As she's traveling back to Adarlan and Rifthold specifically, midway somewhere in the ocean, she feels the transition, this energetic shift of, okay, I no longer have access to my fire magic. So she needs to be Celaena. She needs that strength. yeah, she needs to embody that place where she feels comfortable, because she's going to have to fight when she gets back to Rifthold.
Without magic.
Without magic. And she has to return as the king's champion and continue to play that part and pretend that she has killed these royals. That was the reason that she was sent there. In her absence, while she's been gone, a lot of different things have been happening in Rifthold. And so as she comes back, this rebel force has allied with Chaol, who has left his role as the
Captain of the Guard.
Captain of the Guard, thank you. And she learns that her cousin Aelin, who is very much a brother figure in her life, is imprisoned at the castle. And so one of the first things that happens when she gets back is she realizes they probably need to free magic, and she needs to get her cousin back. And so she's allying with Chaol and some of these rebels in order to do that. And we really see her take on this dual role, and it's an interesting strength, and I think it's something that we can learn from, like in the theme of celebrating women and strong female characters. Sometimes we do have to step into another version of ourselves to get things done, whether that's putting on a mom hat or putting on a CEO hat, or I used to have to, when I put the headphones on and I get in front of a microphone, I put on the Mandee Montana hat. It's just a different element of who I am. It's not a facade. It's just another piece of my identity. And I think that that's something that I've learned from this book, is like, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It can be a strength. It depends on how you use it and how you flex it. And so I find this particular book to be really fun and interesting, because we see her go back and forth with that, and we see her make things happen by posing as Ansel of Briarcliff, who we met in The Assassin's Blade, to get her attention and spark something that happens later.
Yeah, and it's really funny because at the time you don't really pick up on the significance of her using that name. It just almost feels like she pulled that name out of thin air, just because she remembered this girl she knew way back when. But there was some significance to that, and I think one of the things that we're starting to see with her is she is incredibly intelligent. She has a very, very strategic mind, and she is always 5 steps ahead of everyone else. Like, she's doing things that you don't even realize is significant at the time, and other people don't realize, like these people that she's, are her allies that she's working with, and some of these rebels that she's working with, and, her friends and her family and all of these people that she's working with, they don't even realize some of the things that she's doing have very big significance, and it doesn't seem like it, and you don't realize it, but she's so strategic and thinking so far ahead that she's doing things that we don't even find out for another 2 books why she did it and why it was important. And I think we start to see some of that develop in her in Queen of Shadows, just how incredibly intelligent and how much foresight she has to be able to, think through, I need to do this. I mean, she is so far ahead of everybody else, and she's just incredibly intelligent. I love this character.
Have you seen The Queen's Gambit?
Part of it.
Okay. So that character, the way that she envisions the chessboard and she sees pieces moving, and she's just like this master genius at chess, that's Aelin. Everybody
else is playing checkers.
Yeah.
And she's playing chess.
They're all the pieces on the board, and they don't know it.
Yes.
She's moving them without even their knowledge. It's masterful. And it's interesting because she's always got this element of surprise. She's always got this card up her sleeve that she doles out in front of the men in these books, and they get so frustrated with her because they're like, why can't you let us in on the plan? She's unwilling to. It's that trust thing that we talked about in the previous episode. She's not willing to trust anyone.
But also there's a big fear of failure. If whatever it is she had planned doesn't work out, she doesn't want anybody to know that. She doesn't want to tell them the plan ahead of time in case something doesn't work out. Well, or doesn't get their hopes up.
And the stakes are so high. I mean, we're talking about the world.
The fate of the world.
The fate of the world is on the line here. So yeah, it's pretty high stakes. So she's keeping things really close to the chest. And so I think that's another a strength in some ways, a weakness in others, but it's pretty impressive what she's able to pull off. And so we see her physical strength again, despite not having magic, man. She's wielding swords, she's wielding daggers. She's got that cocky arrogance that she wields too, which is impressive, especially when facing another Fey male that shows up out of nowhere, Lorcan, and his dark magic. We also see that, Rowan is like, hey, dude, you left me in Winland, but that's not cool. I'm coming to find you. And so he shows back up on the scene, even without magic, and we see his power and strength there and how the strength of their relationship, they have a bond.
I think there's a lot of their strength comes from the strength of their relationship.
Yes. And I think
he gives her strength, but she
Yes.
gives him strength too.
I was about to say they feed off of each other's
Yes.
strengths, even like,
Which is how a good relationship should be.
yeah. Like, I mean, we don't see this piece yet. We see it later, but like even their magic is so complementary of each other. The
Yes.
fact that she has fire magic and his is ice and wind, because that ice and wind can manipulate and complement her fire in such beautiful ways. And their personalities are a little bit like that too. So yeah, I really love
I love their relationship.
and the strength of that too. And we start to see that. We also see, and we'll get into more detail on this in the next episode, but we also see a shift in Lysandra. She's had some things happen over the years since we met her in Assassin's Blade. She's been through hell and back.
We talked about her in case you don't remember.
Yeah.
Lysandra is the one that was being trained to be a courtesan, and she was very shallow. She was, all she cared about was outer beauty, and she was rude. She was manipulative. She was jealous. She was just spiteful. She was just not a likable character, and she ends up being one of my favorite characters. But yeah, we see a big character arc in her.
She makes a shift.
She does.
She makes a shift. And we also see
Little foreshadowing.
we also see, and I think the biggest way that we see that initially is she tries to help Selena Aelin, and she's really resistant to it. She doesn't want her help because she remembers how poorly they got along when they were teenagers. But there's a child with her, a young female child, and Aelin is one of these people who she does not hurt children. She's very protective of them, and so she feels like she's being manipulated a little bit by Lysandra when she first meets Evangeline. She doesn't understand really what's going on, and then as she digs a little bit deeper, she learns that Evangeline actually tells her when Lysandra's not present, she saved my life and she prevented me from going into
A life of being a courtesan.
a life of this awful service. And because I didn't want that and I was scared. And so she put a scar on this girl so that her beauty was impaired. And it increased Lysandra's debt to her madam, where she should have been nearly free of her debts and could have lived her own life. She chose to sacrifice
to save
this young girl. And so that strikes Aelin as, okay, well, maybe you're not the person that I thought you were. And they have some additional conversations around their relationship with the Assassin's Guild and all, and they decide to work together. And so that's the beginning of a new female friendship. And again, it's tentative. She's unsure, not sure where it's going, but she starts to lean into that. And again, it becomes something that is a massive strength for both of them.
Oh, yeah.
Later in the series, and something that that we encourage on the podcast all the time. It's why we started it, right? Like when Ashley and I first started this podcast, we wanted to introduce each other to our friends because they're so cool and inspiring and amazing. And it was like we can draw strength from each other because we all have different gifts. And I think
building each other up as women
Yes.
is so important. And we start to see that with Aelin and Lysandra. They bring out the best in each other, whereas when they were younger, they brought out the worst in each other.
Yes, and I think that that's a big shift that we see in Aelin specifically in these last 4 books that we didn't see much of her with Selena. We saw it sort of tested with Ansel and Nehemia early on, but through these final 4 books, we're going to see an even greater number of women come into Aelin's life that she forms a relationship with, and they all have different strengths.
And another thing that really kind of stood out to me, because we've sort of talked about the shift from Selena to Aelin. Mm-hmm. And what sort of struck me is Selena was a very selfish, like independent individual person. I don't need anybody else. I don't care about anybody else. Like, that's kind of the vibe you get. But as we make this shift to Aelin, one of the things that really stood out to me is we start to see the depth of her loyalty. Like, she is so loyal to the people that she cares about. And we kind of start to see that in this book because of the lengths that she goes to set her cousin Aelin free, to get back to Terrasen. Like, we just start to see a whole shift in her from being this isolationist, individual, selfish, I'm not going to care about anybody else, to this extremely loyal person. So that's another big character shift and I think that's one of the reasons why Sarah J. Maas made such a big deal of the difference between Selena and Aelin. Mm-hmm. Like, yes, it's the same person, but it's almost like two different identities. And until she embraces Aelin and her, that identity, we don't really see as many of her positive. She's always been strong. She's always been just a badass. But we start to see all of these likable qualities in her.
The like royal qualities that she's going to need
the
as a leader.
Leadership qualities
Yes.
that she didn't have as Selena because it was all about her.
And she didn't want.
No, she didn't want the responsibility of leadership.
Right. And there's power in leadership, but there is a heck of a lot of responsibility. And she's been running from that since she was 8 years old.
Yes.
Understandably so. She watched her parents killed for it, right? Like she didn't want that. So this is one of my favorite books in the series. And I think it's because I like the transition point, and it's really where the plot starts to really get put into motion. I feel like we got a lot of background.
Yes, the first 4 books are background.
They're fun. There's a lot of adventure.
It's why you understand who she is.
Mm-hmm. But we really start to see, like, Heir of Fire, she goes to get information from Maeve about these word keys. And these word keys are how she is going to put the evil down, essentially, in the book, right? She has to go find them, and she has to put them back in a lock to seal the evil and to create a better world. That's kind of the essential plot point. And that's what's happening in this book is she's got to release magic so she can find these keys and put that into motion. And so the journey in Queen of Shadows goes from her arriving back in Rifthold to figuring out how to free her cousin, free magic, defeat the king, and get back to Terrasen so she can find these keys and put them in the lock. She knows she's got to raise an army and in part to do that too. So she's got a lot to do in this book, and she really gets to work. And it's where you start seeing there's more information that unfolds, but I feel like the strength in this is her kindling these beginnings of relationships with a couple of women, Lysandra and Nezrin, who is in the city guard. She's been working
with the rebels.
Fighting with the rebels.
These Vogue princes.
She's
the demons that we talked about last time.
She's a very skilled archer. And so we see her starting to form these female relationships. And then, we get to a point where she releases magic. And they all work together to do that. They release Aelin first through the help of another female. And we'll talk more about her in the 3rd episode of this series. But, I love that about Sarah J. Maas is the way she just positions all these like touch points of like strength in women where it could be a male character, but she chooses
to make him
a female character.
The important, relevant side characters that deeply impact the plot are all women.
Yep. And I love that about this series. It's very empowering.
That's why we're focusing on her writing.
Right. So at the end of this book, managed to free magic. They've killed the king of Otterlin, and they realize that they really are facing 2 villains. They're facing this demon, Erewhon, who's been masquerading as a duke underneath the king, but he's really been pulling the strings. And then we've got Maeve, her aunt, who there's a lot more about Maeve that we're going to discuss in the third episode. But you've got these two big bads that she's got to fight. And so at the end of Queen of Shadows, they've sort of accomplished their goal there.
By releasing magic.
By releasing magic.
The king.
We've had some redemption. Lysandra has killed Erebin. That's another thing that I really like about Aelin that I think is a strength, and we'll see it happen later in the series too. We'll talk more about it. But Aelin doesn't, when she's transitioning from Celaena to Aelin, that lack of cockiness happens, that she starts to step more into this leadership role because she allows people to make the kill when it's their kill to make.
Yes.
She doesn't have to have that title of Otterlin's assassin anymore. She's released that. So she
doesn't need the credit.
No. And she has every reason to want to take the kill for Erebin, for herself, because of all the hell he put her through. But he's put Lysandra through all kinds of different hell since he won her bidding. And you can just imagine what that's like. And a lot of that's left to the imagination in these books too. But we learned that she has been kind of his courtesan throughout all this time and subject to...
And it has not been pleasant. Again, no details.
We just know it's not been pleasant.
But it is very heavily implied that it was not pleasant.
So I appreciate that about Maas and Aelin, that they allow for Lysandra to be able to be the one that says, no, I'm gonna slit this guy's throat. I'm putting him to an end. And, and then they move forward in an alliance and they head to Terrasen. And so that takes us to Empire of Storms and Tower of Dawn. And these two books, like Kelly said, you can read them in tandem. And I kind of listened to them in tandem this time. That's fun too. The audiobooks are fabulous, by the way. Elizabeth Evans is a great narrator if you choose to listen. But we're going to focus on Empire of Storms because Aelin is featured in that, and she's not really featured in Tower of Dawn. It's more of a side story that's happening in the southern continent with Chaol's journey because he is greatly impaired. He uses
at the end of Queen of Shadows when they kill the king. During that battle, Chaol is seriously injured, and the Tower of Dawn follows his journey. And I mean, he's given a responsibility, but he's gone to try to make allies of the Southern Kingdom, but also, like Mandee mentioned last time, the Southern Kingdom is where the Torre Chesme is, which is the epicenter of healers and healers that still have access to their magic. That's where we talked about Irene wanting to get to the Torre Chesme. Well, that's in the Southern Kingdom. And so not only are they sending Chaol to try to get them as allies, they're sending him there to try to be healed at the Torre Chesme. So Tower of Dawn is more his story and doesn't focus on Aelin. So that's why we're going to talk about them a little bit separately, because there's some strong female characters in Tower of Dawn.
Yeah.
So we may talk more about that book in our next episode where we're talking about sort of the side characters. We'll focus on Empire of Storms because that's the one that's about Aelin.
Right. So in Empire of Storms, she and her gathered allies, Adian and Lysandra, Evangeline, Rowan, they are headed north to Terrasen. It makes sense. She's been wanting to go home and get back to Terrasen since page 1. I mean, that's been the point. Even as Celaena, she admitted she was from Terrasen and she wanted to get back to the north, right? So Aelin and her little band of friends are headed north, and they're denied. She's denied as the queen by the lords that were there, and they treat her very poorly and basically say, come back when you have help. Ha, ha, ha. You don't have any. And
because they're very dismissive of her because they know that she was an assassin. They know
the story
of her identity as Celaena. And so they're very dismissive and just ugly and rude and dismissive of her because they don't think she's very queenly because of her background.
And frankly, she hasn't acted it.
She really hasn't.
She knows. So she's like, okay, I'm going to go gather an army of assassins and thieves and whatever. And so then you start to see her get very strategic again. She goes to Skulls Bay, and we see that privateer Rolf that Kelly so greatly pointed out last episode. And, you know, he's got some magical skills, and he can help her find this key that's so important to the plot, right? So she gathers him as an ally, and along the way, she starts showing off her magic, her fire magic, and starting to defeat some of the enemies. And it's starting to rally some people that have been sort of hidden beneath the surface while magic was suppressed. There are people that start coming out of the woodwork. Rolf sort of goes and finds some of them, the Messenians, and we see them emerge a little bit later. Right now, they kind of seem like a myth, but Aelin...
They've been in hiding.
They've been in hiding, but Aelin and her strategic thinking recruits Lysandra to shift because, oh yeah, by the way, she's magical and a shifter. She can shift into any other kind of creature or animals.
It's so cool.
She's very cool. And she could use this for harm, and a lot of shifters were killed in this world in the past because they were thieves and assassins,
and spies. So nobody wants them in their court because they can turn themselves into anything. They can turn themselves not just into animals, but to people.
Oh, yes.
Like she can turn her, with her shifting ability, she can make herself look like any other person. So nobody trusts these people because they can so easily deceive you in so many ways.
And she does it right in front of Rolf, right off the start. You see
Yes.
that she poses as Aelin, and Celaena is being Celaena, and the two of them are in the room together, and it's a situation. And it ends up being humorous. But it kind of sets the stage for some other plot points that are going to come to pass. So Empire of Storms is where she starts gathering these armies, and she sends out some letters while she's in Skulls Bay.
And nobody really knows she's doing it.
No.
Because she doesn't let anybody in on her plan. Remember, we talked about this. She doesn't want to let people down. And so she's doing all of these things in the background, covertly trying to, you know, I mean, she's got a plan. She knows what she's trying to accomplish, but she doesn't tell anybody else what her plan is in case it fails.
Yeah, she utilizes them. She manipulates them, and she kind of gives them enough of an idea to get them on her side, but she is doing some things in the background. And so Empire of Storms is a journey from Rifthold to Terrasen to Skulls Bay, down the coast to Eelway in search of this key.
The lock.
And the lock.
They're trying to find the lock because they keep being told that in order, because they're looking for it's like two different journeys. We've got to find 3 keys, but then we have to have the lock to put the 3 keys into in order to send these demons back to their world and lock them there. So she's got people that are looking for all 3 keys, but she's going to look for the lock in Eelway, which is there's a sunken kingdom there, and so they've been sent there, and it's
the ancestors left the lock there. And we do see this is an interesting world because there's so many supernatural elements, and we see the ancestors come back kind of like in spirit form throughout the series. Early on, we saw Celaena guided by a character named Elena that we'll talk about more in the next episode. And so she makes kind of an appearance again in Empire of Storms at the end with the lock, and she starts unveiling some of the story that gives some more context and some more understanding of the sacrifices that Aelin's going to have to make going forward. And we see his father Brannon, who was a Fae king of Terrasen that was gifted with fire magic, that Aelin is sort of like, she's called the heir of fire. Brannon's descendant is what that's specifically about. And there's lots of references to that and allusions that are made. And so she is sort of weaving all of these pieces together, all of these truths and these histories. And she's being very strategic as she's pulling all of these people together covertly and on the surface, because she's got these pirates that she's working with as she's sailing down south. And then once she gets to Eelway, a few other people sort of start to file in. We see another character that's been kind of off to the side outside of Aelin's view that we'll talk about more in the 3rd episode. We see Elid Locking come in, who was a childhood friend of Aelin's. She was one of the few children that Aelin was around, but she was scared of Aelin because of the fire magic, and Elid was sort of shy and reserved. But Elid's mother, Marion, looked after Aelin and is the one who found her when she woke up after her parents died. So there are some important pieces Aelin and her mother play a very pivotal role that we'll talk more about in episode 3 as well. So we're starting to gather the pieces onto the board at the end of Empire of Storms that set us up for the final book, Kingdom of Ash. But some pretty devastating things are revealed and happen as we conclude Empire of Storms. We see a character that Kellie and I both love, and we'll talk about her character arc in episode 3, Mandee Blackbeak. We see her join Aelin on ship. And we learn that in a lot of ways, these two women are mirrors of each other, and they have to work together to heal both of their kingdoms. And they learn about that from Elena as they discover the lock. Is that a good way to put that succinctly? Because it's a lot that happens.
And how they fit together, and how their stories are so interwoven, and it takes both of them. It's very interesting because they're both such strong women and just
different.
Very different.
Very different.
But
they have some similarities, and they are sort of mirrors of each other. Mandee is very cold. She's like a cold-blooded killer when we meet her. And
definitely one of my favorite characters. She is so interesting.
She's a queen in her own right, and we'll get into more of that. But she's like a queen of iron. There's this moment when they're getting into, and this is a detail element. You're just going to have to forgive me. It's a Mandee moment. Manon is like this queen of iron, these iron teeth witches that she's been raised with. And then you've got Aelin, who's referenced as this queen of flame and shadow. And there's this prophecy about when iron and flame meet for the witches, and that comes up later in the next book. But there are other prophecies that Aelin's aware of too. And so it's like all of a sudden all these pieces are starting to fit together, and they realize that there's going to have to be a massive sacrifice made. And Manon's going to have to carry forward this journey with the keys, while Aelin figures out how she's going to sacrifice herself with this journey with the lock. Is that a good way to put it?
Yes.
And it gets interrupted because one of the big bads shows up.
Maeve. Daggum Maeve.
And she's summoned sort of innocently.
It wasn't, I don't even know how to say it without like going down this rabbit hole of telling the whole plot. But she was not summoned to hurt Aelin.
Yes.
She was summoned for a different reason.
For aid.
Yes. But it doesn't feel that way. It feels like it was done maliciously. And so Maeve shows up because she's a bad dude. I'm telling you, we're really starting to realize how bad. But Maeve shows up, and it's not pretty.
No, it's not pretty. She enslaves Aelin after she whips her brutally. I mean, strips her down naked, basically, from the waist up, and whips her brutally. And Rowan is nowhere present. It's done in front of a lead.
No one can save her. Like, no one can. It's impossible to intervene. She's got these people. Her allies, several of them, are there and witness it happen, but they have no way to intercede on her behalf.
Because they're currently blood sworn to her. Or to Maeve.
Some of them. Manon is there, but she can't help, and there's a specific reason why she can't help, and it's because Aelin did not want her to help. Because she had a bigger purpose that she had to carry out. Nobody knew what it was. Nobody knew that it was...
Till after Aelin's.
Yeah, it was Aelin that actually prevented her from intervening, but nobody really knows that at the time. It's very shocking. It's very upsetting for everybody. The ones that are frozen because they're blood sworn to Maeve, so they can't intervene. You've got a lead who, she's just a weak human. She can't intervene against Maeve, who we think is just this very powerful
Queen of the Fairies.
Fae queen, but she's not. Spoiler alert. We'll get into that next episode. She's really even worse than what we think she is. So there's nobody that can intervene. And so Aelin is just being whipped to almost death.
And she just allows it to happen. She doesn't fight back.
Yes.
And
And there's a reason for that, which
Yeah.
we'll find out.
And then she's enslaved in iron. And Maeve has this ability to walk through worlds. She's a world walker. And so she opens a portal and takes her army and Aelin
And leaves.
away and leaves. And we don't
And
know
nobody
where,
knows where.
Yeah, we don't know where she's gone. And so we're left at the end of Empire of Storms with Aelin's allies gathered on the beach. Rowan distressed. He doesn't know where. We find out his wife now. They were married secretly on the boat. We doesn't know where his wife is gone. And he's incredibly distressed. And the rest of them are like, well, what are we going to do now? We've still got to find these keys. Did Maeve get the keys? Turns out Aelin gave them to Manon, which is why she couldn't help. And they've got to figure out how to move forward.
Standing there because Aelin's
been the strategy maker.
Well, and her kind of she was sort of sacrificing herself and set all of them up to continue towards Terrasen and
defeating the other big bad.
Defeating
Erewhon.
Yes. And setting Terrasen back up to this world power that it used to be without her. So she sacrifices herself, gives them all of the pieces they need to be able to go and do what they need to do without her. But I think she doesn't realize the depth of all of their loyalty towards her, because Rowan's like, heck to the no, I'm going to go find my wife. Y'all go do this, because she just sort of set him up as, you go be king. You go lead.
Yeah.
And he's like, nope, I'm going to go find her. Y'all go do all this stuff.
She's convinced Lysandra to play her.
Yeah, because remember we said she could turn herself into anything. Well, she turns herself into Aelin to try to trick everybody that the queen is still there. And her like inner circle realizes that it's Lysandra, but everybody else doesn't. And here's the ironic part. So we told you, see, I get all fired up talking about it.
It's one badass strong woman.
But the irony is, unbeknownst to anybody else, when Aelin is sending all these letters when they're in Skulls Bay, after she is taken by Maeve and disappears, all of these people, we talked about last time, all of these just random people that you're like, okay, this was a random story about this random person, and here's a random story about this random person. Guess what? Those are all the people that she sent the letters to. So you've got her cousin Gavin coming with his fleet. You've got Ansel of Briarcliff coming with her army. You've got the Silent Assassin show. Like, all of these people.
I got chill bumps just thinking about it again.
All of these people
Yeah.
that are loyal to Aelin, and she has sent these letters asking for aid. They all show up because she called, because really they all owe her in some way.
There's a lot of life debts.
They all owe her, but there's a loyalty there because of relationships that she built. They all show up after she's captured.
Yeah, but they don't know. They think that Lysandra is Aelin. So this gathered alliance starts to head north to Terrasen, and that's where we see the beginning of the final book, Kingdom of Ash. And this is a big book. This book is like 900 pages.
Lots going on.
And there's lots going on. And you've got one of the things I love about this series too, that Sarah J. Maas is just a master at writing multiple points of view. So you get inside the heads of all of these strong women. And we're really going to focus on that in episode 3. So this last part, we're just going to talk about Aelin's final transition and like her coming into her own, and where we see her end in the series with this last bit in Kingdom of Ash. But then in the next episode, we're really going to dig into these side characters that we've referenced and kind of their individual character arcs, because truly there could be an individual book about each of these women. Many of them, they're just that interesting.
And I kind of hope that there are some books
I do
written
too.
about each of these people and their story, but that's a
whole
whole
other
other conversation.
Yeah. So as we start out Kingdom of Ash, we're really in a terrible place. It's devastating. We start out with these two little like minor chapters ahead of chapter 1 about the prince and the princess. And it's the perspective of Aelin and the perspective of Rowan. And Rowan is desperately searching for Aelin while Aelin is trapped in an iron box.
And being repeatedly tortured.
Yeah, brutally. I mean, and it's graphic. I mean, Kellie mentioned trigger warnings in the previous episode. I mean, it's abusive. And she doesn't go into extreme detail, but it's enough detail that if you were to watch it played on screen, I would have a hard time keeping my eyes open and actually watching it.
Yeah, so there's...
I let my imagination blank some things out.
Maeve has one of her blood-sworn officers who is a sadist.
Oh, he's terrible.
That tortures her. And then she has her magical healers heal Aelin every time so that they can keep torturing her over and over. So they torture her to where there's like no skin left on her body. And then the healers come in and heal her so that they can then go in and rip all of her skin off or burn her down to her bones or whatever it is, like over and over
for
and
months.
Over
it's
again.
It's like 3+ months or something. When she finally meets up with, Rowan again, he tells her like down to the minute almost like how long they've been separated. But I mean, it's just
it
absolutely
almost breaks
brutal.
her.
It does almost break her.
But you can tell, we talk about strong characters. That's the whole premise of what we're talking about. I mean, you can see her strength in the fact that she's able to, she's on the edge of breaking when Rowan finally finds her, but she doesn't break.
There's a couple of things about that I want to highlight because we are celebrating women and their strengths. As Celaena and as Aelin, up to this point, she's worn her scars almost like trophies.
Yeah, badges of honor.
Badges of honor. And they each tell a story.
Yes.
And storytelling is such a key piece to strength, whether you're talking about individuals, organizations, families, legacies, all of it. It's all built upon storytelling. And even within this story, you see that leveraged in a couple of different places. Totally separate from Aelin. She sees it at Mistward with a character there. We see it separately in Tower of Dawn with a character there, that the power of story is what moves a people forward, right?
Well,
and it moves her forward.
Even looking at Rowan, he's got the story tattooed on his body.
Yes.
And she has the story of her scars tattooed over her scars. That's another side point, but these scars are very important to her.
Yes, and they're removed. So as they're removed,
when they're healing her after every torture session,
because her skin is
takes
fresh.
all the scars. Yeah, it's brand new skin every time.
So what she has to start doing, and what she does, Maeve is telling her other stories that aren't real. She's providing visions. This is one of her like demonic vogue powers that she has, is she's able
your mind
to craft a vision and create an alternate reality for a person, and it feels very, very, very real. And so she's doing this to Aelin, and she's revealing some bits of her history, but she's also showing Aelin, if you give me your secrets and if you let me win, essentially,
Tell me where the keys
are. I could make this your reality. You could go off and be happy with Prince Rowan without responsibility. And that's very tempting to her. It almost breaks her. But what doesn't break her, the part that I want to point out, is she tells herself a story, because I think we have to, as women, we have to remind ourselves of our stories and our strengths and not focus on the negative running tape and the crappy visions of reality that we craft for ourselves and we can allow in our own minds, in our current reality. That can suppress us and it can cripple us. But if we will tell ourselves the true story of our strength and what we've overcome and what can happen and how we can be powerful and how we can be strong, we can overcome the day-to-day frustrations, the big, powerful things that set us back in our lives, similarly to the way Aelin gets through this torture.
Yes. And she tells, and I don't remember, do you have the exact words? But she tells herself that. And also, she very clearly hears her mother in her head. And her mother basically says, we do not yield. Mm-hmm. So when she's at her breaking point, she hears her mom every time saying, do not yield. Do not yield. And that is how she's able to survive this torture. By she continually tells herself that, and she continually tells herself the story about there was a young princess who loved her country. And, you know, you'll see it in the book because she tells herself the same story every time. But basically, she's reminding herself of her identity
and reality.
Of this princess who loves her country so much that she has sacrificed and done all of these things for her love of her country, of Terrasen.
And as she's getting to the breaking point, there's a time where her allies have crafted this story to get Maeve away so they can come in and rescue her once they finally figure out where she's at. She hears that Maeve is going to go get this demon Vogue collar to enslave Aelin. And she so desperately doesn't want that she's willing to try to provoke this sadist to kill her, essentially. And so she's at that point. And part of the reason she gets to that point is because she believes that Rowan has forgotten her.
Because of what Maeve has put into her head.
The one thing that pulls her back from it is she remembers when she's been shown this vision of happiness with Rowan and this, like, essentially a fairy tale that Maeve has woven her to try to convince her to tell her the keys. The thing that prevents her from giving up the key is she remembers that the Rowan that she fell in love with has suffered pain the way that she has, that's part of why they fell in love, is this shared, it's like a trauma bond in part, but also like they both know each other's suffering. And that's part of why they love each other so much, is they've healed together. And so when he does come in, she escapes, actually. He doesn't actually save her. She escapes and saves herself, truth be told. But he kills the sadist on her behalf. And then they begin the journey, her trying to heal from this torture. And gosh, the way that it's written and the way that he gives her space.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So they're on their way to Terrasen. But
sorry, I got sort of lost in that for a moment.
Yeah, she got a little starry-eyed there for a minute. But they're on their way to Terrasen, but there's a long period of time where they're on a ship. And so on this ship, as they're traveling, you know, she is going through a healing process, because for a long time she didn't even talk to Rowan, because she kept thinking that it wasn't real, that it was a vision that Maeve was implanting in her head. So she didn't even realize that it was really real for a minute. And so this travel is kind of a metaphor for her healing journey. As they're traveling, she's healing not only physically, but mentally, and because, you know, a lot of the torture wasn't just physical, it was mental and emotional as well. So she's kind of going through this healing journey as they are traveling towards, you know, Terrasen and the battle and all of the things that they have waiting for them.
And she physically retrains and she rebuilds some of that physical strength that she needs in addition to her mental strength. And there's something else that she's doing that we're unaware of for a while, but she is tunneling down into her power.
Yes.
Digging deep within herself so that when she does meet Maeve again, she's going to have this powerful killing blow. Fire, because that is one of the things that Maeve is terrified of is fire. So Aelin is beginning to heal. She's really having to tell herself this story again and again, even now, because she knows that one of the things she saw in this lock with Manon when it's revealed to her is that she's going to have to make a sacrifice of herself.
The ultimate sacrifice.
In order to forge the lock.
To forge the lock.
Yes, and to allow the world to be healed and to be a better place and rid of evil. And so she's really having to come to terms with that. And she's just now able to start having that conversation with Rowan. And she's putting on a bravado for everyone, this arrogant Selena persona. She's pulled a little bit of that out of her back pocket again, because she is like dying inside, knowing that she is about to die and that she may not actually make it back to her kingdom at all. She probably won't. And
Rowan's not having it.
No.
He's like, no, you're not going to sacrifice yourself. And she said, yeah, the prophecy said I have to. And
yeah. And so he's like, well, we'll see, because to whatever end, I'm with you, right? And as they're on this journey back to Terrasen, they then encounter some old friends in Aniel. They run into Kaol, and it turns out he's married to somebody that we've met before.
Remember when we were reading Assassin's Blade and the healer that she taught to, that she taught to defend herself, and she was trying to she gave her the money and said that the world needs more healers. Well, guess what? That turns out to be Irene, who is now married to Kaol. And we haven't talked about that whole situation much because that book is Tower of Dawn. And we said we're going to skip that and save that for the next episode because that does not have really anything to do with Aelin except for, as just brief mentions. That's Kaol's and Irene's story. So we'll get more into that. But this woman that she gave the money to be able to travel to the Torre Chesme to further her learning how to be a magical healer because, in the Southern Kingdom, magic is released and Irene has magic. This is that girl.
Yeah.
And so when she comes and they see each other, which Kaol had figured it out because he saw the little note, remember the note that Selena wrote to Irene when she left her the money. And I said it became kind of a talisman that she keeps in her pocket. Well, when Kaol saw it, he recognized the handwriting. And when she told the story of the stranger that left her the money, Kaol knew who it was. He didn't tell Irene. He let them meet, and it was really kind of a cool reunion.
Very cool reunion. And it happens on the cusp of battle in the kingdom where Kaol was raised before he left and moved to Rifthold. Yeah. And so we're set up there with an interesting battle with Morath, and it's a darn good thing that, Aelin and her friends showed up at this time because they're kind of in a pinch. And her fire magic comes into play, and she really shows the depth and power of her strength in this tunneling down that she's done. She has to release it in order to save the Cognate army that came up from the southern continent and the people that have come with her while they're all gathering together before they head up to Terrasen to face Morath again, because Terrasen has now called for aid. And so
because this demon army has broken into two.
Oh yeah.
Like you've got the ones that are headed to Terrasen for that battle, and then you've got the ones that have come here. So they're trying to defeat the ones here and then head up to Terrasen for the final battle.
Yes. And so Aelin releases this amazing amount of power that blows them all away. And she does it in such a typical like Selena Aelin fashion. I mean, she dons this like golden armor and she shows up at dawn, because the other thing we see in this book repeatedly is that symbols have power.
Yes.
Just like I was mentioning that stories have power, symbols have power too. And we see her as this symbol of fire and dawn and power and royalty, and it's just exhibited in such an artistic, beautiful, theatrical way that she knows is inspiring and is going to invite another group of people to join. We then see these
to fight for her.
These mountain men that have been enemies of Aniel forever come in and join them in the fight. So they all head north to Terrasen, and then we're coming to the end and the culmination of Kingdom of Ash, and as we do, we'll talk more about the many players that really make the ending just so beautiful. And as Kellie mentioned in last episode, it really ties a bow on the series just wonderfully. We'll talk more about that in episode 3. But what we see from Aelin is after they've left Aniel, they run into Dorian and they've got to forge the lock. And after she's displayed this massive amount of power, we see her having to make the ultimate sacrifice. And I feel like this is something we also see in a lot of fantasy series, right? We see Harry Potter have to do this. We see it in Lord of the Rings with Frodo. Aelin's she's got to sacrifice herself. She faces these gods. And through kind of some negotiation and whatnot, she ends up giving up the majority of her power, but managing to save her life. But what she's bargained for, we thought Erewhon was going away with the lock. that kind of got lost in the shuffle. And so
Because she was betrayed by the gods. She was not nice people.
No. And there could be a whole lot more to that, but that's a different theory and a different podcast. So as we see Aelin still alive, she's got to go back to her friends and say, hey, I messed up, but hey, I'm still here. I don't have my fire magic.
I don't have my power anymore.
I got a little bit, but not what I had before.
Not like what I had before.
Right. So, there's some disappointment, some relief, but they all
anger.
Had
some anger. Of them are mad at her.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So they all head north. And again, she's got to be really strategic. And we see some other women that get really strategic in the end too. But Aedion and Lysandra have been defending Terrasen with a few others, and they're really beaten up by the time Aelin and all get there at the end of Kingdom of Ash. And it's amazing to me when Aelin shows up, she's riding on a stag, this immortal stag that's the symbol of Terrasen that's got a flame between its antlers. She's riding on his back as she comes into battle wearing this golden armor. Again, symbols have power. Her sword is a flame. And she goes straight into warrior princess battle assassin mode and is just literally slaying demons all the way up to the gate before she gets... Actually, she never even makes it into the gate before she meets Maeve on the field.
Yep.
Some other people end up battling Erewhon up on the battlements, and we see Aelin and Rowan and a couple of his buddies on the field in a showdown with Maeve. And it's epic.
It's epic. But in typical fashion, we're going to have a happy ending. So you know that she's going to win the battle, which she does. And evil is defeated and everything's great. But I think part of the interesting part of the end is, everybody's made such a big deal about Aelin all of this time because of the depth of her power. Mm-hmm. Like she is the strongest, has more power than like anybody else. They've just really focused on her fire power, but yet she's able to defeat this incredibly powerful, because we find out, we thought Maeve was the Fae Queen all this time. Well, really, she's one of the demon queens. She's tricked everybody into thinking that she's Fae, but she's not. She's really one of the demons. So she is incredibly powerful. And Aelin is able to defeat her, even though she has given up all but a little bit of her power. Mm-hmm. So she's just... It's the way it's written is just so beautiful, because we start thinking that Aelin is powerful because of her fire power, but that's not what makes her powerful.
Yeah, there's this really beautiful line, and I'm going to butcher it because I don't have it right in front of me, but her mother calls her Fireheart. Mm-hmm. And this is a term of endearment that she carries with her. She's suppressed for a long time, but then Rowan learns it, and Rowan also calls her Fireheart. It's this really beautiful, endearing name that she carries. And she reveals in the end that her mother didn't call her Fireheart because of her fire magic, but because of her deep passion and fire love for her country and loyalty and family.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. I love how you put that. And it ends up being her cunning and her strategy in the end mm-hmm. that undoes Maeve. Those ancient word marks throughout the series, she takes that ability to utilize them to lock and unlock different pieces and people into place so that she's able to defeat them or reveal something. And that's how it's actually how Maeve and Erewhon are trapped in the end, so that they can be defeated, is through this mm-hmm. very ancient magic that really comes from knowledge and learning, right? Yeah. And so that's a power and a strength that we all have if we choose to wield it.
And I think that is the beautiful part of how this ended, because mm-hmm. you think throughout this whole series that it's going to be her fire magic that is what defeats all of the evil, but mm-hmm. it's not. It is the strength of her cunning, her intelligence, her relationships, her love for her country, her love for her, friends and family and those that she's fighting for, and that's where her power comes from. And I think that's where all of our power comes from.
100%. I really think that that's why we love this series so much. And there's so much of what Kellie just said makes Aelin special, but there are bits and pieces and elements and glimpses of that in so many of the women in this story that I'm so excited that on the next episode, what we're going to do next month is we're going to dig into some of these side characters that we've mentioned throughout the past 2 episodes.
That are so interesting.
These interesting women and what their character arcs are. And we're going to start back at Throne of Glass and carry you through Kingdom of Ash and introduce you to each of them. And, you know, some of them show up in different places again, like we mentioned with Irene and Ansel and Manon, who we barely touched on. They kind of pop up in and out of the points of view throughout the series, but we're going to kind of take you from Throne of Glass through Kingdom of Ash, reintroducing you to each of these characters and just how, you know, charismatic and dynamic and strong and, you know, inspiring that they are. Because even though this is a romance, fantasy world, adventure series, there are so many things that we can draw from this in our own lives and say, hey, you know, I want to be a little bit more like Irene Towers. I want to heal people. What does that look like in the world today? Or I need to carry that passion and that fire for my family and stand up and for them when they need me. You know, there are just so many elements of these characters and of this story that I think we can draw from that I'm just excited to continue this conversation with you.
Me too.
The Celebrating Women podcast wants to hear from you. Email us a voice message to celebratingwomenpodcast@gmail.com. We would love to hear your story or the story of an incredible woman you know. Become part of the conversation on social media. Facebook.com/celebratingwomenpodcast. On Instagram, search Celebrating Women Podcast. The Celebrating Women podcast has been presented by Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler, Texas. Book your appointment today. Stop by the spa in Cumberland Shopping Center or online at handandstonetyler.com. Support the show for as little as $3 per month at celebratingwomenpodcast.buzzsprout.com or visit our show notes. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to the Celebrating Women podcast. Hey guys, it's Mandee. Have you been struggling to lose those extra pounds? Oh, I know. I have totally been there. An extra, 15 to 20 pounds can totally creep up on you in perimenopause. Or at least it has with me. And I think I found it early. I hope it's not happening to you. But if it is, I've got the solution. You can lose up to 15 pounds in 8 days with an incredible product line that I found and I want to share with you. Get a custom product recommendation with a complimentary wellness screening in the show notes. Just click Zing with Mandee.